Marizon, can you hear me? Can you hear me? You can. Oh, okay, good. Marlene and Stan, you can hear me? Good. Can the room hear me? All right. Okay, whether you're joining us just now or whether you've been with us for Psukei de Zimra on the field, we begin with Shacharit, page 69 in your Lev Shalem Machzor. Yoshev al kisei ram v'nisa shochen ad marom v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv rananu tzadikim b'Adonai oy l'sharim nava tehila befi yesharim titromam Uvdirei tzadikim titbarach, uvilshon chasidim titkadash, uvekerav kedoshim tithalal, uvmalach hakal ravot. Lehodol lehalel leshabeach lefaer leromem lehader levarech lealeu kales al kol direi shirot v'tishbachot. David ben Yishai, Avdecha Meshichecha, Yishtabach Shimcha Lad Malkeinu. Please rise, El Malchedo B'Kadosh Baruch Hu Lachanei Bracho Ve'Adonai Tavi Adolam Baruch Atah Adonai El Melech Gadol Batishbachot El Odod Adonai Niflaot Habocher B'Shirei Zimra Melech El Chei Olamim. Page 70, we open the ark and we recite Psalm 130 antiphonally. I'll recite a line and you recite the line after me. Shir Hamalod mi ma'amakim kraticha Adonai Adonai shima v'koli tien oznecha kashuvot lekol tachanunai Im avonot tishmor ya Adonai mi amor Ki imcha slicha l'man tivarei Kiviti Adonai kivita nafshi v'lidvaro hochalti Nafshi l'Adonai mishomrim laboker shomerim laboker Yachel Yisrael el Adonai ki im Adonai hachesed v'harbe imo fedud V'oivded Yisrael mikol avonotav. We close the ark. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabba v'yamad yivrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon uvyomechon ובחיידךו בית ישראל בגלה ובזמן קריב יאמרו אמן יהי שמר במבורך לעולם יומי יומיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר את שמם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה לעילה Mikol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran be'alma v'yimeru. Amen. We're about to do the Baruch 171. This year's High Holiday Liturgy is somewhere in between like the past, when we would basically do a full unabbreviated liturgy, and last year when we packaged our High Holiday services into like 2-hour chunks. It's more traditional, but we still truncated things just as a way of lingering a little bit less long, particularly indoors. So we're going to do what's called a Hecha Kedusha for Shacharit, and what that means is we're going to say the Baruch Hu, and we're going to be seated. We're going to say the Shema together and daven all the way through. Look at page 80 for a second, because I won't be able to remind this to you then. You see where it says the silent Amidah for Yom Kippur may be found on page 213 there? Don't do that. Instead, maybe you can dog ear your machzor. You're going to go to 252, and we're going to begin that Amidah together, so that it includes the Kedusha. So right from 80 to 252, you'll say those blessings with me. We will do the one piut on 256, with you repeating it after me. We'll do the Kedusha on 257. We'll sing together 258 and the top of 259 until we get to that first blessing. At that point, we will continue with our quiet Amidah, but don't continue on that page, because the next of those pages are specifically for the repetition. You then have to, I'm so sorry about this, go back to 215 to continue your quiet Amidah. Now, it probably took me longer to explain that than the amount of time that we are saving with this truncated liturgy, but it's still worth trying. So I hope you remembered some of that, and do your best. And we're on Baruch Hu on page 71, after which you may be seated. Barechu et Adonai Amvorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam HaPotech Lanu Sharei Rachamim Umeir Einei HaMechakim L'Slichato Yotzer Or Vorei Choshech Oseh Shalom Vorei Et HaKol Or Olam B'Yotzar Chaim Orod Me'ofel Amar Vayehi. Amen. El Baruch Adonai Eloheinu. Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu Shavach Masei Yadecha B'Yamei Orei Yorsha Sita Yiparuch Hasela Titbarach Tzureinu Malkeinu V'Golinu. Kulam Aovim, Kulam Birurim, Kulam Giborim, V'Kulam Osim Beima, V'Yira Ritzon Konam, V'Kulam Porchim Bihem Kedusha V'Tohara, B'Shira Uv'Zimra, V'Archim, Shebchim Farim, U'Maritzim Akdishim, U'Mamlichim, Et Shema El HaMelech HaGedol HaGibor V'Nagashu. V'Kulam Mekablim Aleim U'Machut Shamayim Zeh Mizeh, V'Notenim Reshu Zeh Lazeh, L'Akdish Le'Yotram B'Nachad Ruach, B'Safa v'Ravanim HaKadosha, Kulam Kecharonim Yomrim Be'Yira, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh Adonai, Tzvach L'Aretz Kevado, V'Ofanim B'Chayot HaKodesh B'Rash Kadol Midnasim Liumat Serafim Liumatam Mishavchim Yomrim Baruch Kevod Adonai Mimkom Oliel Baruch Him Oditenamo. Kamor leoserim gedolim kiolam chasto or chadash al Tzion ta'ir v'nizkechu lanu meira leoro baruch ata Adonai yotzer ha'meorot avar baftanu Adonai lenochem lagdol adracham al talina v'inu makim. Ki v'shem kodshecha hagedol b'hana rabba atachnu Nahagila benismecha Yeshuatecha Bavinu l'shalom yarba kanfot haaretz V'tolichenu kumut li'artzeinu Ki el poel Yeshuot ata V'ana b'charta mikol am b'lashon V'kerav tanu l'shimcha gadol sela bemet להודות לך ולייחדך באהבה. ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת ויציב נכון וקיים ישב נאמן והוא בחבי נכון. לדור הדור קיים ושמו קיים וכיסו נכון ומלכותו ואמונתו לעד קיימת ודבריו חיים וקיים הנה אני נכון אילן ליום העולם. אמת שאתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, מלכנו מלך אבותינו, גואלנו גואל אבותינו, יוצרנו צור ישועתנו, פודנו מצילנו מעולם שמך, אין אלוהים זולתך, עזרת אבותינו אתה הוא מעולם הגינו מושיע לנו. תהילו לאל עליון ברוך הוא ומבורך משה בני ישראל לחנו שירה בשמחה רבה ויאמרו כולם מי כמוך בעלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נוראתי להודות ספלה שירה חדשה שבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ויאמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופתח נאומך יהודה בישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל. 252 שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו אלוהי אבותינו אלוהי אברהם אוי 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 אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב האל הגדול הגיבור והנורא אל עליון גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה מסוד חכמים ונבונים ומלב לדעת מבינים. הבטחה פי בתפילה בתחנונים, אוי לחלות, אוי לחנן, פני מלך מלא רחמים, מוחל וסולח לעוונים. זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, וכותבנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן אברהם, אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיי מתים אתה רב להושיע, מכלכל חיים בחסד, בחיי מתים ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ורופא חולים ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומי דומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אב הרחמים, זוכר יצוריו לחיים ברחמים, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון לדור ודור, הללויה. ואתה קדוש יושב תהילות, תהילות ישראל אל נא. ובכן לך כל יכתירו לי אל עורך דין, לבוחן לבבות ביום דין, לגולי עמוקות בדין. לדובר מישרים ביום דין, להוגה דעות בדין, לבטא גביעות חסד ביום דין, לזוכר בריתו בדין, לחומל מעשה ביום דין, לתאר חוסה בדין, יודע מחשבות ביום דין, לחובש כעסו בדין, ללובש צדקות ביום דין, למוחל עוונות בדין, לנורא תהילות ביום דין, לסולח למוסף בדין, לעונה לקורא ביום דין, לפועל רחמה בדין, לצופה הנסתרות ביום דין, לקונה עבדה בדין, לרחם עמו ביום דין, לשומר אוהבה בדין, לתומך תמימה ביום דין. ובכן לך תעלה קדושה, כי אתה אלוהינו מלך, מוחל וסולח. נעריצך ונהגתי שך קצת שיח שרפי קודש, עמקתי שמך בקודש, ככתוב ביד נביאך, וקרא זה על זה ויאמר. קדוש 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 אדוני צבא מלך הארץ, כבודו כבודו בשער תבשולים זה לזה, איה מקום כבודו ליומתם ברוך יאמרו. ברוך אדוני ממקומו הוא יפן ברחמים ויחונם יחדים שמו ערב בבוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים ביבש שמה אומרים שמה ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית לעיני כל חי להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מאדיר שמך בכל הארץ והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ודברי קודשך כתוב לאמור ימלוך אדוני למעשה לדור ודור, הללויה, לדור ודור נגיגו לך, ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקיש, ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו למוש לעולם בועד, כי המלך גדול וקדוש אתה, חמול על מעשיך, ותשמח מעשיך, ויאמרו לך חוסיך בצדקך עמוסיך, תוקדש אדון על כל מעשיך. ובכן תן פחדך אדוני אלוהינו על כל מעשיך ואימתך כל מה שבראת ברוך כל מעשים וישתחוו לפניך כל הברואים ויעשו כולם אגודה אחת לעשות רצונך בלבב שלם כמו שידענו אדוני אלוהינו שהשלטון לפניך עוז בידך וגבורה במיניך ושמך נורא על כל מה שבראת ובכן תן כבוד אדוני לעמך, תהילה לרעך ותקווה לדורשך, ופתחון פה למייחלים לך, שמחה לארצך, וששון ליראך, וצמיחת קרן לדוד עבדך, ועריכת נר לבן אישה משיחך, במהרה בימינו. ובכן צדיקים ישמחו, וישרים יעלוזו, וחסידים ברינה יגילו, ועולתה תקפוץ פיה בכל הרישה כולה כעשן תכלה, כי תעביר ממשלת זדון מן הארץ, ותמלוך אתה אדוני לבדך, על כל מעשיך בהר ציון משכן כבודך, וירושלים עיר קודשך, ככתוב בדברי קודשך, ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור הללויה, קדוש אתה ונורא שמך, ויין אלוהים בלעדיך, ככתוב ביגבה אדוני בצבאות, במשפט והאל הקדוש נקדש בצדקה, ברוך אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש. If you're still davening, please continue at your own pace. In lieu of a full repetition, we are going to do some of the sections, the highlights that we would normally do in a repetition, and we turn to page 262. Please rise as the ark is opened for Shema Kolenu. Shema Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu Chus v'rachem aleinu Bekabel berachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu Hashiveinu Adonai Elecha Benashuva Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem Oh Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem Oh Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem Al tashlichenu milfanecha beruach kodshecha al tikach mimenu Al tashlichenu liyeit zikna kichlot kocheinu al tazveinu The ark is closed. May be seated. 263. Eloheinu levatenu salach lanu mechalanu mekaber lanu ki anu amecha v'yata Eloheinu anu vanecha v'yata avinu Anu avadecha ve'ata Adoneinu Anu kahalecha ve'ata chelkeinu Anu nachlatecha ve'ata goraleinu Anu tzonecha ve'ata roeinu Anu charmecha ve'ata notreinu Anu fe'ulatecha ve'ata yotzereinu Anu rayatecha ve'ata dodeinu Anu segulatecha ve'ata keroveinu Anu amecha ve'ata malkeinu Anu mamirecha ve'ata mamireinu Eloheinu Eloheinu tavo lefanecha tfilatenu ve'al titala mitchinatenu she'anachnu azefanim ukshe'orav lomar lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Tzadikim anachnu velo chatanu Aval anachnu v'avotenu chatanu Ay, 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 Ashamnu Bagadnu Gazanu Dibarnu Dofi Ay 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 ya, 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 ay, Hevinu, Behirshanu, Zadnu, Chamasnu, Tafalnu, Sheker, ay, 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 da 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 da, ay, ay, Yatsnura, Kizavnu, Latsnu, Maradnu, Niatsnu, Sararnu, Avinu, Pashanu, Sararnu, Kishinu, Orefa, Hay, 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 Ya, Da, 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 Hay, Hay, Ay, 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 Rashanu, Shichatnu, Tiavnu, Ta'inu, Titanu. We turn to the bottom of 265. Please remain standing. Atayo dera zeolam, Talomot sitre kochai, Atachofes kocha drevaten, Bachen klayot balev, Ein davar nalam mimeka, Vein nistar mineged einecha, Uvechen yiratzon mevenecha Eloheinu v'lo yavotenu, Shetislach lanu akol chatotenu, V'timcha lanu akol avodotenu, U'dechaber lanu al kol peshaenu, Al chet shechatan lefanecha v'motzon, Chet shechatan lefanecha v'imutz halev, Al chet shechatan lefanecha v'lidan. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'yitzhara, ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'yodim u'b'lo yodim, ve'al kulam elo aselichot selach lanu mechalanu kaper lanu, al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chachash v'chazav, Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chapat shochad, Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'ratzon, Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'lashon hara, Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'chazav. Chet shechatanu lefanecha b'einayim ramot, Ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'azud metzach, Ve'al kulam elo aselichot selach lanu mechalanu kaper lanu, Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'fri gadol, Ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'flilut, Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tziyat reya. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'tzumat yad, Ve'al chet shechatanu lefanecha b'timhon levav, Ve'al kelulam elo aselichot selach lanu mechalanu kaper lanu, Ve'al kulam elo aselichot selach lanu mechalanu, selach lanu mechalanu kaper lanu. Turn to page 271. We open the ark. I mentioned this last night outdoors, so if you were out there, you may have heard me say it. The original non-abbreviated version of Avinu Malkeinu, which is not what we have in front of us, originally had a line in it that read like this, and it does appear, believe it, in the daily Sidur Shim Shalom, but it does not appear in this Machzor. Avinu Malkeinu, our father, our parent, our king, Mena Magefa Minachalatecha, prevent the plague from your offspring. from those who inherit you. It's not in this one, but it originally was in the Avinu Malkeinu. And the line was cut from many modern machzorim, including ours, because the whole idea of a plague seems so medieval and impossible and unlikely. And according to Rabbi Eli Cantor, the original text of that very line of Avinu Malkeinu was not mena, prevent, but atzor, stop. Avinu Malkeinu, our parent, our king, atzor magefa minach letecha, stop the plague that's already upon us. And the word stop was there because when these lines were being written, there were plagues pretty frequently. And so they were actually asking it to be stopped mid-plague. It was edited in the modern version of the machzors that do include it to prevent, because it seemed strange to ask God to stop a plague that wasn't present. So I said last night that perhaps the most important edit we could say in this year's Yamim Noraim is to say the original Avinu Malkeinu in addition to the ones that are here. Avinu Malkeinu Atzor Magefa Minach Latecha. Our parent, our king, we ask, we beg, we pray, we plead. Please finally stop and interrupt and end this plague upon your people and upon all people. Avinu Malkeinu Chata'anu Lefanecha Avinu Malkeinu Malkeinu Avinu Malkeinu Achsirenu B'tshuva Shlema Lefanecha Avinu Malkeinu Shalach Refuah Shlema L'Cholei Hamecha Avinu Malkeinu Zachrenu B'Zikaron Tov Lefanecha Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Chaim Tovim Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Gula V'Yeshua Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Parnasa V'Chalkala Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Zechuyot Avinu Malkeinu Kodvenu B'Sefer Slicha U'Mechila Avinu Malkeinu Atzmach Lanu Yeshua B'Karov Avinu Malkeinu Harem Karen Yisrael Amech Avinu Malkeinu Harem Karen Mishicha Avinu Malkeinu Asalaman Tivuchim Al Yehudecha Avinu Malkeinu Asalaman Ba'ei Ba'eshu V'Mayim Al Kiddush Shemecha Avinu Malkeinu Asalamancha Imlo Lemanenu Avinu Malkeinu Chorneinu V'aneinu Avinu Malkeinu Chorneinu V'aneinu Ki ein banu masim Aseh imanu Tzedaka v'chesed Aseh imanu tzedaka v'chesed V'hoshienu Avinu Malkeinu Chorneinu V'aneinu Avinu Malkeinu Chorneinu V'aneinu Ki ein banu masim Aseh imanu Tzedaka v'chesed Aseh imanu tzedaka v'chesed V'hoshienu. Ark is closed. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabba be'alma divrach kirutei v'yamlich malchutei v'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael v'gala u'v'zman kari v'yimeru ameh Yehei shmei Rabba mevorach Le'olam le'omei omaya omaya yitbarach Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yittadar v'yitaleh v'yitalel Shemei dekudesha berichu Le'ela min kol birchata V'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran beyoma v'yimmeru amen. Titkabal tzeloton uvaoton dechol Yisrael kodam avon divishmaya v'yimmeru amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu b'al kol Yisrael v'yimmeru amen. Ose shalom bimromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu b'al kol Yisrael v'yimmeru amen. Please remain standing for the Torah verse, page 274. Ein kamocha b'Elohim Adonai v'ein kema'asecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim umemshaltecha b'chol dor v'ador Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimluch leolam va'ed Adonai oz le'amo yitein, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom, Av harachamim, heitiv avirtzoncha et Zion, tivnei chomo Yerushalayim, Ki v'cha levad batachnu melech el ram v'nisa adon olamim. Vayhi binso Aaron vayomer Moshe Kuma Adonai ve'afutzu oivecha ve'yanusu mesanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah udevar Adonai miYerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato Adonai Adonai El Rachum V'Chanun Erech Apayim Rav Chesed Ve'emet Notzer Chesed La'alafim Nosei Avon V'Fesha V'Chata V'Nakeh Adonai Adonai El Rachum V'Chanun Erech Apayim Rav Chesed Ve'emet Notzer Chesed La'alafim Nosei Avon V'Fesha V'Chata V'Nakeh Adonai Adonai El Rachum V'Chanun Erech Apayim Rav Chesed Ve'emet Notzer Chesed La'alafim Nosei Avon V'Fesha V'Chata V'Nakeh B'nei Malkeinu Adonai Shalom Ozvenu v'shinu v'shish k'tamid v'chod b'ntat Hashem לא תהיה שום מחלוקת בין Yiratzon, Yihul Ratzon, Refi Vegon, Libi Lefanachanat Suri Vego Hali, Vani Tefilati, Lecha Adonai, Eid Ratzon, Elohim Berov Chastecha, Aneni Behemet Ishecha, Vani Tefilati, Lecha Adonai, Eid Ratzon, Elohim Berov Chastecha, Aneni Behemet Ishecha, Vani Tefilati, Lecha Adonai, Eid Ratzon, Elohim Berov Chastecha, Aneni Behemet Ishecha. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nora Shemo.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh v'nora Shemo.
Galul Adonai iti v'romema Shemo yachtav. Lecha Adonai agedula v'agevura v'tiferet v'hanetzach v'hahod ki chol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz ki chol b'shamayim u'ba'aretz Lecha Adonai hamamlacha v'yamin na'aseh lechol erosh Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehadam raglav kadoshu. This is Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho Ki kadosh Adonai. Let's switch it. Eloheinu. Maybe stay standing for 1 second because we're going to move the Torah. We're going to switch the Torahs because we opened the wrong one. I mean, it's a good Torah. Don't get me wrong. It's a very nice Torah, just not in the right place. We'll come back to you later. Okay, so we're going to be on page 278 in just a minute. We read the first section of Parshat Acharei Mot on Yom Kippur morning. One of two times this morning that we're going to go way back in time to what Yom Kippur originally was. which was many fewer words and many more sacrifices, with the high priest in the Holy of Holies doing the work on our behalf and trying to achieve atonement from God. And we're going to read through it in the actual original text of the Torah, and then linger on it a bit later in the Avodah service in the middle of Musaf. Now you can be seated, page 278. Biazor, Begim B'Shilach HaLachosim, Boven Amar Amen, Hakol Havu Golenu Chabod La Torah, Yamod. Is Marshall here? Yes. Marshall. Yamod. Your name? Moshe ben Abraham B'chan Ali Arishana Baruch Shenatan Torah Moshe B'Gdushato Batem Bad Bekim Lechem Chayim Kolchem Ayom.
Sure.
I'll tell you more.
Baruch Adonai Habarach.
Baruch Adonai Habarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Habarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bochar Bonu Mikol Hamim Natan Lanu Et Torato Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vaydaber Adonai el Moshe acharei mot Shnei bnei Aaron bekorvatam livnei Adonai vayamutu. Vayomer Adonai el Moshe daber al Aaron achicha ve'al yavo v'golei al HaKadosh v'vei laparochet el pnei hakaporet asher Aaron ve'lo yamut ki ve'anan eira el hakaporet וזאת יברון אל הקודש ופר ונבקר לחטאת ולעולה כתונת בהד קודש ילבש ומכנסי בד יהיו על בשרו ונבנית בד יעקב ומצנבת בד יצנוב בגדי קודש ברחץ המים את בשרו ולבשם ומאת עדת בני ישראל ייקח שני סיריזים לחטאת ולאחד לעולה והקריב אהרון את ברכת אשר לו וכיפר בעדו ובעדתו.
Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet V'Chayei Olam Nata B'Tuheinu Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Talmud. Dvar Shir Bat Yaakov V'Sara Aliyah Shniya, page 279.
Baruch Adonai Baruch
Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kitshanu Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Hamim V'Natan Lanu Et Torah Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
אמן. ולקח את שני הסירים והעמיד אותם לבני אדוני פתח כל מועד ונתן אהרון על שני הסירים גורלות גורל אחד לאדוני וגורל אחד לעזאזל והקריב אהרון את שעיר אשר עלה עליו הגורל אדוני ועשהו חטאת והשעיר אשר עלה עליו הגורל לעזאזל יעמוד חי לבני אדוני לכפר עליו ושלח אותו לעזאזל המדברה והקריב אהרון את ברכת אשר לו וכיפר בעדו ויד ביתו ושחט את ברכת אשר לו.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Natan Lanu Chayei Olam Nata B'Tocheinu Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Was the third aliyah given out? Yes. Yamod. Avram, Yaakov, and Moshe, Rivka, Leah, Shlishit.
Second paragraph, page 279.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. ולקח מלאמתה גחלש מעל המזבח ונהיה אדוני ומלוך חפנה כתורת סמים דקה והביא מבלה ברכת ונתן את הקטורת על האש לבני אדוני וכיסן הקטורת את הכפורת אשר ליטות ולא ימות ולקח מדם עבר ויזע וזול פני הכפורת קדמה ולפני הכפורת יזע 7 פעמים מן הדם ויצבעו ושחט את סיר החטאת אשר להם והביא את עמו מבית לפרוכת ועשה את עמו כאשר עשה לדם הפר ויזע אותו לכפורת ולפני הכפורת וחיבר לקודש מטומאת בני ישראל ומפשעיהם לכל חטאתם וכן יעשה לעול מועד השוכן איתם בתוך טומאתם וכל אדם לא יהיה בעול מועד בבואו לחבר בקודש עד צאתו וכיפר בעדו וביד ביתו וביד כל קהל ישראל.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Rachel bat Nachum Hershel v'tova fega v'yet. Shmuel ben Dover Chayam v'Rachel Aliyah Rabbi.
Page 280, second paragraph.
Baruch hu et Adonai Hamvorach. Baruch Adonai Hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
אמן. ויצא אל המזבח אשר לפני אדוני וחיבר עליו ולקח מדם הפר ומדם השעיר ונתן על קרנות המזבח סביב ויזע עליו מן הדם ואצבעו 7 פעמים ותיארו וקידשו מטומאות בני ישראל וכילה מכוורת הקודש ויתו אל מועד ואת המזבח והקריב את השעיר החי ושמח אהרון את שידיו על ראש השעיר החי והתוודה עליו וכל עוונות בני ישראל וכל פשעיהם לכל חטאתם ונתן אותם על ראש השעיר ושילה ביד אישיתי המדברה ונשא השעיר עליו את כל עוונותם אל ארץ גזירה ושילח את השעיר במדבר ובארון אלו אל מועד ובשד את בגדי עבד אשר לבשו לקודש וניחם שם ורחץ את בשרו במים במקום קדוש ולבש את בגדיו ויצא ועשה תולתו ותולת העם וכיפר בעדו ובידם.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher natan lanu torat emet v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'torah.
Amen. Ben Zion ben Chanan Nissen Leah Chamishi. Before we read the 5th Aliyah, we're gonna cover the Torah. Second, I say Mishabera for Cholim. If there are names you'd like it inserted in the bracha, when I pause after reciting the congregational list, please rise in your place and we'll kind of say them all together, those of you who are joining us digitally and those of us who are joining us live. And when I feel confident that all the names that need to be said have been recited, I'll continue the bracha. Misha berach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah v'yivarech v'rapeh kol hacholim v'kol hacholot b'kilak tosha hazot et zahava yafa bat Esther v'et Rivka bat Pesha v'et Harav Yaakov Baruch ben Ori v'Chava v'et Yosef Menachem Mendel ben Gittel v'et Yehuda ben Avraham v'Sarah v'et Bela Esther Gittel bat Fega v'et Ben Sion ben Gittel v'et Elena Kramer v'et Aaron Avram ben Adina v'et Cyril Chana bat Sivia v'et Risachana bat Chasi Geula v'et Avram Simcha ben Avraham v'Sarah v'et Sarah Tzil bat Miriam v'et Menachem ben Lili v'et Yehuda Yisrael ben Leah v'et Shulamit bat Miriam v'et Mordechai ben Esther v'et Chaim ben Sarah Leah v'et Marion bat Angelica v'et Michael Kuenko v'et Penina Drebin v'et David Fulman v'et Rivka Chana bat Zipporah v'et Lucy Leah bat Dora v'et Paula Zombra v'et Pinchas ben Eliza v'et Yudit bat Rivka v'et Danny Benjamin ben Tova Nurit v'et Gershom ben Chaim v'et Diverta v'et Sarah bat David v'et Dina v'et Ahuva Naomi bat Eti v'et Taibel bat Rachel Leah v'et Paul Fitzpatrick v'et Yael bat Avraham v'Sarah v'et Eliana bat Ariela v'et Moshe Amos ben Avraham v'Sarah v'et Ruvain ben Yeshua v'et Harav Tzivya Chana bat Sarah v'Yirachmiel Yosef v'et Yonatan Pinchas ben Dona Rivka Peril v'et Yoshua ben Shendel v'et V'kol hacholim Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yimalei Rachamim Lahem Lachzikam L'Rapotam V'Yishlach Lehem Refuah Shlema Min Hashamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf B'toch Sha'ar HaCholim Hashta B'Galav Yizman Kariv V'Nomar Amen. We wish a refuah shlema to everyone in our minds and whose names we mentioned today. We continue with the fifth aliyah, page 281 in the Machzor.
Baruch Hu es Adonai HaMavarach.
Baruch Navarach Lamed.
Baruch Adonai HaMavarach Li'olam Bo'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Bach Abanu Mikol Ha'amim B'nosan Lanu Et Torah. So Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'yed chil v'chatat yaktir mizvecha v'yam shalech tasir lazazel yechabes begadav v'rachatze b'zaro v'amayim v'acharechen yavo lamachane v'yed barachatat v'yed sirachatat asher uvadamam lechaper v'kodesh יציל מחוץ המחנה, ושרפו באש את אורתם ואת בשרם ואת פרשם, והסורבתם יחבש בגדיו, ורחץ בשרו במים, ואחרי כן יבוא למחנה, והייתה לכם לחוקת עולם, בחודש השביעי, בעשור לחודש, תענו נפשותיכם, וכל מלאכה לא תעשו העזרא והגר הגר בתוככם, כי ביום הזה יחבר אליכם לתאר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם לבני אדוני תתארו.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Nasan Lanu Torah Emes V'chayei Olam Notah B'sochinu Baruch Atah Adonai Nosein HaTorah.
Amen. Sixth aliyah after that. Yadu. Yaakov Leah bar Yaakov Yosef Umalka V'et Chaim David ben Tzvi Udevora Lalaya Shishid. Middle of 281.
Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMavarach.
Baruch Navarach Lamed.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Harbanu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato Baruch Atah Adonai Notein HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Shabbat Shabbatoni lachem v'nitem et nafshotechem chukat olam v'chiper hakohen אשר ימשך אותו, ואשר ימלא את ידו לכהן תחת אביו, ולבש בגדי עבד בגדי הקודש, וכיפר מקדש הקודש יתו אל מועד, ואת המזבח יכפר, ועל הכהנים ועל כל עם הקהל יכפר, ותעזור לכם לחוקת עולם, לכפר בני ישראל מכל חטאותם אחת בשנה, ויעש כאשר ציווה אדוני את משה. Moshe Aaron ben Dover.
Moshe Aaron Dover Rezel Maftir. Please rise. We're going to bring the other scroll over. Yikadal, Yikadash Shemei Rabbi.
Amen.
Adi Rachutei, Gamlich Machutei,
Mechanu Chedecho Beit Yisrael.
Bagala, Bagala, Ubizman Kari, Imeru, Amen. Yehei Shemei Rabbi Mevarach, Le'olam Melmaya, Yitbarach, Yitbarach, Yishtabach, Yitbarach, Juman, Yitnaseh, Yitadar, Yitaleh, Yitalao, Shemei Kudesh Haberu, Liela, Liela, Mikol Birchata V'shirata, Tushbechata V'nechamata, Damiram B'yalcha V'yimeru, Amen. Yamdumag B'mahagolel Sefer Rishon. Please rise as the first scroll is lifted. Vezot Torah Asher Samosel B'nei Yisrael Al Pi Adonai B'yad Moshe Eif Chaim Hi L'Machazikim Ba'avetom Be'avushar. Isn't that close to her?
Yeah.
Eif Chaim
Hi L'Machazikim
Ba'avetom Be'avushar Deracheh Darchei Noam Bechol Tivoteh Shalom Deracheh Darchei Noam Bechol Tivoteh Shalom Ay 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 Anay 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 Ay 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 Anay Ay 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 ay
the girdle. That's right.
Two, yeah, both of them.
Maftir Aliyah, middle of 282. Middle of 282, Maftir Aliyah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch. Baruch Adonai Baruch Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol amim v'natan lanu et torato. Baruch Adonai noten haTorah. U'v'yasol hakodesh hashvi'i hazeh. Mikra kodesh yeh lachem v'nitem et nafshotechem kol melacha lo tasu. הקרבתם עולה לאדוני ריח מיכה כבר בן בקר אחד אל אחד כבשים בני שנה שבעה תמימים יהיו לכם ומנחתם סולת בלולב השמן 3 עשרונים לפר 2 עשרונים לאל האחד יסרון יסרון לכבש האחד לשבעת הכבשים זריזים אחד חטאת מלבד חטאת הכיפורים ועולת התמיד ומנחתה ונזכם ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen.
Please rise when the second Torah is lifted. Vezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe livnei bnei Yisrael avi Adonai b'yad Moshe. Torah, 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 Torah. Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Torah. Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, Torah. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Torah, 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 Tziva lanu Moshe. Morashat Keilat Yaakov, Morashat Keilat Yaakov, Morashat Keilat Yaakov, Torah, Tziva lanu Moshe. As soon as the Torah is in its holder, in just a minute, you can have a seat. You shouldn't take too long introducing an introduction, but before the Haftarah, we're going to hear some words from Rabbi Dr. Avi Havivi, who has spearheaded the lead up to and the now launch of what we hope is going to be an inspiring and complex, interesting year-long project in our community to mark the fact that we're entering the year of Shemitah, which in agricultural ancient Israel and even modern Israel, as we'll hear more about, is the mitzvah that requires us to let the land go fallow for a year, and it's supposed to awaken our hearts to our relationship to the land itself. And Rabbi Dr. Havivi has been putting together an amazing program that we hope that you'll participate in many levels, and we're going to hear from him before the Haftarah. Thank you, Rabbi.
Good Yantif. So our sages selected the Haftarah text for today clearly, very thoughtfully, and intentionally. The prophet Isaiah, in the middle of the Haftarah, if you pay attention, says, "So, while we are all fasting and feeling all droopy in here, there are a lot of people out there who need our help. The poor, the homeless, the downtrodden. You're hungry? There are folks out there a lot hungrier." Yeshayahu, the prophet, provides an ironic counterpoint to the Yom Kippur liturgy. On this day, when we are most focused on ourselves as individuals, who shall live and who shall die, and all that, the Haftarah says, hey, it's not about you. There's a whole world out there. Quit navel-gazing. Stop wallowing and start doing something. At TBA, I think we've made some good strides in the start doing something department. We have our Olam Chesed Yibaneh Committee, formerly known as the Social Action Committee, under the able leadership of Tyson Roberts, which engages in things like food collection, clothing drives, help for immigrants. And this year we will add, ta-da, the launching of our green team. Why now? Well, as Rabbi Kligfeld said, this new year, 5782, is a Shemitah year. The Torah says that on every seventh year, Jews in the land of Israel had to stop their regular agricultural labors and let the land lie fallow. The land got a rest, a Shabbat. Ownership of crops was suspended for the year, and all were allowed equally to take whatever food they needed. Landowners, immigrants, servants, even animals, all were allowed free access to the land's resources. All monetary debts were canceled. So the Shemitah year was a time for people to take a pause and hit the reset button. The community could reestablish harmony with each other internally and with its land. We thought that this year would be the perfect moment to relaunch our TBA Green Team. Although we don't observe the Shemitah laws in the diaspora, we are looking to honor the ideology of Shemitah by exploring ways we can appreciate and care for the world around us so that it can continue to nurture us back. We've got all kinds of plans for the coming year. There will be opportunities for learning about environmental issues, recycling, composting, single-use plastics, solar energy, how our food gets on our plate. There will be Torah study around these issues. Rabbi Rembam will be kicking us off with a class on October 5th, right after Sukkot, and Rabbi Kligfeld will have an ongoing class on the Shemitah laws this fall. All these classes will be recorded if you can't make them in real time and will be available with all the rest of our TBA podcasts. There might be an eco book club if enough folks are interested. There will be outings and activities. We started this past Sunday. We had a great reverse Tashlich beach cleanup led by our own Danielle Mark, along with 180 other shuls worldwide. There will be a monthly newsletter of ideas for making your home and your life more eco-friendly. September Tishrei will be greening your kitchen. I know September is half over, but our newsletter will get out soon. We'll be looking at ways to green the TBA campus in terms of energy usage, recycling, food waste here, and disposables. By the way, we need more people for that subcommittee, so if you're interested, please volunteer. There's even talk of a Pressman Academy Temple Beth Am garden on the premises. So there's a lot of green stuff that's going to be happening at Temple Beth Am. Please find a way to get involved that suits you. Keep an eye out on your TBA email, and all our Green Team plans will be found at our shul's website. When you go on the left and click on the Get Involved button, there's going to be then a button that pops up that says Green Team. It's not there yet, but I think it might be within a few days. And register for events and classes. Let's honor the Shemitah year together by listening to the prophet Isaiah. There's a world out there that needs our tending. And as Genesis told us, it is our job to steward that world. So let's do our best to honor and preserve the beautiful earth that God has entrusted to us. Thank you for this time, Rabbi. A sweet and healthy year to all, and Gemar Chatima Tova.
Yeshkoach, Rabbi Dr. Havivi, and thank you so much for your vision and leadership for this. He'll now go give the same message outdoors, and we will continue with the Haftarah, which can be found on page 284 in your Machzor.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'minim tovim v'ratza v'divrei hanemarim b'emet. Baruch atah Adonai הבוחר בתורה ומשה עבדו וישראל עמו בנביאי האמת והצדק. ואמר סולו סולו פנו דרך הרימו מכשול מדרך עמי כי כה אמר רם ונישא שוכן עד וקדוש שמו מרום וקדוש אשכון ויתקע ושפל רוח, לחיות רוח שפלים, ולחיות לב נתקעים. כי לא לעולם אריב, ולא לנצח אקצוף, כי רוח מלפני יטוף, ונשמות אני עשיתי. בעוון ביצוע, קצפתי והכהו אסתר ויקצוף, וילך שובב בדרך ליבו. דרכיו ראיתי וירפאהו וינחהו ושלם ניחומים לו ולאו אליו. בורני בשפתיים שלום שלום לרחוב ולקרוב אמר אדוני ורפתיו והרשעים קיים נגרש כי ישקה לא יוכל ויגרשו ממיו רפש ותית אין שלום אמר אלוהי לרשעים קרא וגרון אל תחסוך כשופר ערם קולך ויגל לעמיד פשעם ולבית יעקב חטאתם ואותי יומיון ידרשון ודעת דרכייך פצון כגוי אשר צדקה עשה ומשפט אלוהיו לא עזב ישאלוני משפטי צדק קרבת אלוהים יחפצון למה צמנו ולא ראית הנינו נפשנו ולא תדע אין ביום צומכם תמצאו חפץ וכל עצביכם תנגשו. אין לריבו מצת תצומו, ולהכות באגרוף רשע, לא תצומו כיום, להשמיע במרום קולכם. החזה יהיה צום אבחרהו, יום ענות אדם נשו, הלכו כאגמון ראשו, דשק ויפר יציע, על זה תיק רצון, ויום רצון לאדוני. על זה צום אבחריהו, פתח חרצובות רשע, עטר אגודות מותה, ושלח רצוצים חופשים, וכל מותה תנתקו. הלא פרוס לרעב לחמך, בנים מרודים תביא בית, כי תראה ארם וכיסיתו, ומבשרך לא תתעלם. אז יבקע כשחר אורך, וארוחתך מהרה תצמח, ועלה לבניך צדקך, כבוד אדוני יאספך. אז תקרב אדוני יענה, תשבע ויאמר הנני, אם תסיר מתוכך מותה, שלח אצבע ודבר אבן, ותפק לרעב נפשך, ונפש נענה תשביע, וזרע בחושך אורך, ואפלתך כצהריים. ונכח אדוני תמיד, והשביע בצחצחות נפשך, ועצמותיך יחליץ, והיית כגן רבה, וכמוצא מים אשר לא יחזבו מימיו. ובנו ממך חורבות עולם, מוסדי דור ודור תקומם, וקורא לך גודר פרץ, משובב נתיבות לא שבת. אם תשיב משבת רגלך, עשות חפציך ביום קודשי, וקראת לשבת עונג, לקדוש אדוני מכובד, וחיבתו מעשות דרכך, למצוא חפצך ודבר דבר. אז תתענג על אדוני, והרכבתיך על במותי הארץ, ואכלתיך נחלת יעקב אביך, כי באדוני דיבר. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל עולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים שכל דבריו הם בצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך, ודבר אחד מדבריך אחור לא ישוב ריקם. כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הנאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון כי בית חיינו, ולעלו הנפש תושיע במהרה בימינו, ברוך אתה אדוני משמח ציון בבניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו אליהו הנביא עבדך, מלכו ודוד משיחך, במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו. על כיסו לא ישב זב ולא נחלו עוד אחרים מכבודו, כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו שלא יכפה נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן דוד. על התורה ועל עבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום הכיפורים הזה שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו, למחילה ולסליחה ולכפרה, לכבוד ותפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנו מודים לה ומברכים אותך. יברא שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד, ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מלכות וסולל על עוונותינו ועונות עמו בית ישראל, ומעביר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה. מלך על כל הארץ מקדש ישראל, מלך על כל הארץ מקדש ישראל, מלך על הארץ מקדש ישראל ביום הכיפורים.
Amen. Shakoach to Mark. We're going to continue. We're saying a prayer for our country and for the state of Israel and for peace. We begin those in the middle of 288. Please rise.
Our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy, accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessings upon the land, upon its leader, its judges, officials, and officers and officials who are devoted in good faith to the needs of the public. Instruct them with your laws of your Torah and help them understand your rules of justice, so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. We pray, Adonai God, whose spirit is in all creatures, Awaken that spirit within all the inhabitants of our land. Uproot from their hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant among those of different nationalities and faiths who dwell in our nation love and compassion, peace and friendship. May it therefore be your will that our land be a blessing to all who dwell on earth and cause them to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me, and let us say,
Amen. Prayer for the state of Israel, second paragraph, 289.
אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו, ברך את מדינת ישראל, ראשית צמיחת גאולתנו, הגן עליה בעברת חסדך, ופרוס עליה סוכת שלומך, ושלח אורך ועמיתך לראשיה, שריה ויועציה, ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך. חזק את ידי מגיני ארץ קודשנו, והנחילם אלוהינו ישועה, ועטרת ניצחון תעטרם, ונתת שלום בארץ ושמחת עולם ליושביה, ונאמר אמן.
May we see the day when war and bloodshed cease, when a great peace will embrace the whole world.
The nation will not fight nation, and the human family will not again know war.
For all who live on earth shall realize we have not come into being to hate or to destroy. We have come into being to praise, to labor, and to love.
Compassionate God, bless the leaders of all nations with the power of compassion.
Fulfill the promise conveyed in Scripture, I will bring peace to the land, and you shall lie down, and no one shall terrify you.
I will rid the land of vicious beasts, and it shall not be ravaged by war.
Let love and justice flow like a mighty stream. Let peace fill the earth as the waters fill the sea. And let us say, Amen.
Morning, everyone. Good Yantif. Many of you are not going to like this sermon. It's a good start, right? And yet I've determined that even if a small portion of you are paying attention by the end, and a small portion of that portion might make even a small change in your lives as a result, I might consider it to be one of the most important sermons I've ever given. And maybe, just maybe, the sermon you least want to hear is the one that you most need to. But let me take a step back and give some context. A cow was brutally slaughtered at my wedding on the dance floor as part of the shtick, not a real one. But the symbol was clear. Two friends dressed up in a cow costume, and the third came as the shochet and shechted him right in the middle of the opening hora. That's how meat-centric and steak-frenzied and fleishik my friend cohort and I were at the time. We would emphasize the word basar, which means meat or flesh, every time it appeared in Birkat Hamazon. Hu notein lechem lechol basar. We saved as students for steak dinners and nearly named it a national holiday when Le Marais, a high-end French kosher steakhouse, opened in New York City in 1995. I was there opening night. On our honeymoon, Javi and I stayed at a vegan bed and breakfast in Ireland for Shabbat because there was no kosher option, not surprising. And then we lampooned the aggressive propaganda literature that was left for visitors to read in their bedrooms, helping them to convince themselves and convince their parents to give up eating meat. And the proprietors of this bed and breakfast told us how thrilled they were to learn that they were hosting a religious Jewish couple for Shabbat. Why? Because to them, it meant that one less chicken would be eaten that weekend. We thought they were nuts. I grew up as a traditional Ashkenazi, New York-based Jew, and I absolutely loved the Jewish diet. My grandmother's gribbinus, which I think my pancreas is still processing 35 years later. Fleischig kreplach to break the fast. Pastrami sandwiches on Visitor's Day at Ramah. And endless meals of scrambled eggs and blintzes and cream cheese on a toasted white bagel. And pounds of lox. I even managed a kosher deli when I was in college. So a significant percentage of my campus calories accumulated in the form of bagel dogs and turkey subs and meat knishes. You get the picture. This pattern continued into my 30s and then changed abruptly. As part of research I was doing for a sermon, I learned things about meat production that were hard to unlearn. And I essentially stopped eating red meat on the dime, and I've barely gone back to it and barely missed it since. A few years later, already living here in LA, I learned unsavory things about chicken farming and slaughter, particularly and sadly within the kosher slaughterhouses in the States and in Israel. So I gave up eating poultry. At the time, this was a personal and private decision. It was made primarily for ethical reasons. While Jewish values and the mitzvah of tsar baalei chaim, which prohibits us from causing pain to animals, should impact, and they do impact, our consumption of food, I never pounded the pulpit on this topic. I kept it quiet. I answered questions when people asked me, but I chose not to preach about it. Because it's hard to talk about this topic without coming off as preachy. In fact, try as I might to avoid it, I know I run the risk of doing that right now. Now, the ethics of food and its impact on the animals that we choose to eat still move me very much. But the ideas that I want to share this morning have much less to do with the lives and the welfare of cows and chickens, and much more to do with the lives and welfare of all of you. Please hear this sermon as a love letter, coming from the mouth and the heart of one who really cares for all of you deeply and wants to share healthy life with you for as long as possible. Within the last year, based on abundant research and reading I've done, I have moved almost entirely to a whole food, plant-based diet. My 25-year-old self is either laughing or crying right now while munching on some steak tartare. Mostly, I now eat and thoroughly enjoy some combination of vegetables and fruit and whole grains and beans and nuts, and very, very little added oil. I don't call it vegan. As one of the writers who has inspired me said it, French fries are vegan, and French fries are pretty toxic. Over the last months, as I thought of all the topics to address to my congregation on this day, I considered and then rejected discussing geopolitics, or a year or two of the pandemic and trying to repackage last year's message of hope and grit into a new format this year, or what Jewish values might say about the state of the American democracy, or how our micro decisions to live comfortable lives are cumulatively making macro impacts on our society and our climate and contributing to a more dangerous world, or any number of worthy topics ripped from the headlines. But I kept coming back to this topic, to the possibility that I just might, and I know it's a might, I might nudge some of the people I care most about in the world, to nudge their cuisine in the direction that I'm convinced has the greatest chance of keeping illness at bay and leading to a long and healthy life. In my research, I came across this data point. Did you know that the simple act of replacing hot dogs and French fries at meals with lentil patties and kale salad will reduce by 90% what little joy you have left in your life? I actually binge on lentils and kale, and I'm a very, very happy man. My core text so far, amongst others, has a doozy of a title, No Subtlety. It was written by Dr. Michael Greger, and it is called, aptly, How Not to Die. I'm not going to waste words in this sermon on the details, but I do commend to you the more than 550 pages of science and research and recipes, as well as a tremendous documentary called Forks Over Knives. But the central theory, backed up by thousands of studies, and perhaps most significantly the China study from the 1970s, is that the most reliable way to keep most preventable diseases at bay and to live a life of health and longevity is to eat nearly exclusively a whole food, plant-based diet. Among the tens of thousands of data points, one compelling one is the drop in negative health markers in the blood and concomitant mortality when small populations throughout history have been forced, either by war or by famine, not because of their own choice, to take on this approach to food for a short period of time. And similarly compelling and distressing is what happens when previously healthy societies and cultures, whose local cuisine had been for centuries mostly plant-based, end up moving towards what some refer to also aptly as SAD, S-A-D, the standard American diet. When cultures make that shift, heart disease skyrockets, as do diabetes, and because everything in the body is connected and every system essentially relies on good vascularization, the detritus deposited in the blood via SAD, the sad American diet, wallops a person's chances of avoiding not only heart attack and hypertension and stroke, but also cancers and dementia and other debilitating diseases. Now, nothing is a guarantee, of course, we know that. There are whole food, plant-based eaters who contract awful diseases randomly and die young. And there are, as we all know, individuals around us who smoke and eat steak and fried foods towards and beyond their century mark. But the big data does not lie. And for now, I am convinced. And for now, I am committed. Now, at this point, even if you are intrigued, you might be wondering, why do I need to hear this from my rabbi? What's his relationship to my food and my health and on Yom Kippur when I'm so hungry? Good questions. Thank you for asking them. I have two primary answers. One of them is blunt and one of them is more subtle. Here's the blunt one. You and I are in a trusting, covenanted relationship. Once you invited me in to be your rabbi and let me into your life, and I thank you for that, you invited me all the way in. And so I'm implicated in your life trajectory. You have asked for my presence, and you will again, and for my support when you get sick. I will sit at your hospital bedside and pray with you as you or loved ones confront illness. I sanctify the births in your family, and I wish the babies a long and healthy life. And I try to bring some solace at deaths. I know it is strange to say it out loud, but let's be frank because it's true. When many of you die, I will be there to bring you honor and to bring your family some solace. So why ought I not share what I consider to be critical insight that might keep at bay some of the very illnesses for which you might ask me to add your name to a Misha Berach list, and which might delay by a considerable amount of time the day on which I am to come to you and recite the final vidui prayer as life ebbs away. I know it's blunt, but those are the contours of the sacred bond that we share, and in some ways deep in what I consider rabbinic work to be, which is focusing on the entirety of the life of my community members. I cannot not share this with you. And the second reason, in what way are Jews in relationship with their rabbis about food? In lots of ways. This just raises the stakes and maybe restores Jewish eating back to a meaningfulness that for many, including myself, I will admit, has been elusive. Many of you email me with questions like this. My dairy fork fell into my meat pot as I was cooking. What do I do, Rabbi? If I now eat kitniot on Pesach, can I buy milled flaxseed before the holiday without a hechsher and use it? Yes, by the way. And all such questions are in the normative category of what a Jew asks the rabbi. We call this category kashrut. And don't get me wrong, I love those questions. I appreciate and celebrate how conscientious so many of you are about the specific and holy details of kashrut, of intentional and observant Jewish eating. But as I think of what Judaism has to offer the world and to us about eating, whether or not the triangle K symbol is legitimate, and how many times broccoli heads must be washed before we can be sure they are free of bugs, that just represents pennies on the dollar. There is more at the core to Jewish eating. We all know the word kosher, but do we know its true meaning? The root in Hebrew is kaf shin resh, and the best way to translate it is fit, as in fitness. To work out in modern Hebrew is la'asot kosher. Essentially, to exercise in Hebrew is to do the kosher thing for you and for your body. So whatever your current cuisine happens to be, I hope you'll join me in at least considering the fact that it's a religious paradox at best and a religious travesty at worst, that you can eat food stamped and determined to be kasher, fit, when what it might do to your body is the antithesis of it. I'm a proud, observant religious Jew, and I struggle with what kashrut has become sometimes in the modern, industrialized, commercialized world. Rabbi Lucas and I used to muse about this all the time. We'd say that we observed kashrut, of course, and we also rued and hated the label hunting and the low-grade kashrut mafia of Pico Boulevard, and the mistreatment of animals and of workers that are sadly integral to the modern world of keeping kosher. I do fear that we have lost a holy foundation of what was once biblical and rabbinic kashrut. And I am not advocating, God forbid, for jettisoning kashrut, but I'm all for reclaiming it so that the menu matches the meaning. Replacing or at least elevating an obsessive search for microscopic contaminants or going for only certain rabbis' approval should be a passionate return to the essential idea that kashrut should be a Jew's way of eating that which most venerates God and God's loan to us of this fragile and vulnerable body. So yeah, I think that as a rabbi, I ought to have something to say about that. Nor am I the first nor anywhere close to being the most important rabbi or Jew to claim that consuming mostly plants should be the highest form of eating. Perhaps you've heard of Rav Kook, the luminous first Ashkenazi chief rabbi of pre-state Palestine. Rav Kook famously valorized exercise and maintaining one's physical health as a prime religious obligation, a mitzvah in and of itself. and a compilation of his writing that was entitled A Vision of Vegetarianism and Peace. It depicts a progression guided by Torah law towards a vegetarian society. Consider this powerful quote from Rav Kook. The power of the soul is very much dependent on the state of the body and its health. We have been preoccupied by spirituality, and we have forgotten the sanctity of the body. We have forgotten that our flesh is holy, no less than our souls. Now, how could the author of those words, or anyone inspired by them, not struggle at least a little bit when seeing an OU symbol on frozen chicken nuggets or a bag of beastly? His words about refraining from meat were as clear as his words from exhorting physical health. He wrote that, quote, in the future ideal state, in the Messianic era, just as in the initial period, people and animals will not eat flesh. And he believed that even if the temple were to be rebuilt, only inanimate produce grown from the earth could and would be offered as a sacrifice. Rav Kook wove together the ethical, the physical, and the spiritual, and he envisioned a Jewish community in the not-so-distant future celebrating Shabbat and festivals and daily sustenance without taking the life of any animal, nor harming one's own life with anything other than the most wholesome of foods. But Jewish wisdom on this topic is older, way older than the 19th and 20th century Rav Kook. The classic rabbinic interpretation of the story of the flood of Noah that we'll read in a few weeks is that the Torah's giving humanity the right to eat meat after the flood was a begrudging concession. The Garden of Eden was the Garden of Vegan, because the generation that warranted the flood was so wicked with their violence and their bloodshed. God basically says, here, if you absolutely must take out your bloodthirsty instincts, don't do it on one another. At least do it on the animals. And in the most humane way. That's classic rabbinic interpretation. We are thousands of years of organic growth of Jewish cuisine and habits since then. But if you really want to be honest about the true original Jewish threshold for permitting eating meat, is that if you really think that's the only way you will be kept from committing murder. If that's the way to satisfy and sublimate your desire to destroy a creation of God, then eat the hamburger. But if you think you can avoid that violence without it, then you should do so. And while he wasn't a rabbi, Einstein knew a little bit about science. And consider this quote. He wrote, "Nothing will benefit human health and increase the chances of survival on Earth as much as the evolution to a vegetarian diet." And pre-modern societies knew something about the link between our food choices and our health. I came across the following ancient Egyptian proverb. 1/4 of our food keeps us alive, and 3/4 of our food keeps our physicians alive. I want our doctors and our physicians to live and thrive and be well. And I'm convinced that our doctors want nothing more than for us to need them less. Now, a few years ago, I might have thought it was a fool's errand to imagine a large swath of people that I know or the society around us giving up the eating of meat, whether for ethical or personal health reasons. But we now live in a different age. We live in the age of the Impossible Burger and Beyond Sausages. And stories like this one told to me by a Beth Am member who said that now on taco nights at his family's home, since they started adding the impossible meat recently, the kids never choose the ones with beef. They've just lost the taste for it. And the same member told me just this last week, and this is a sign either that the apocalypse is coming or the Messianic era is nigh. In Europe, they will soon unveil at European McDonald's the McPlant, a fully vegan Big Mac, both the beef and the cheese produced with vegetables. Now, it might take a while to turn Texas around. But the proprietors of Cussin's Cottage in Ireland, that vegan bed and breakfast from our honeymoon, are probably thrilled at humanity's progress in the last 2 decades. They don't even need to host religious Jews at their place in order for fewer chickens to die on Shabbat. There are evocative appeals to plant-based eating that speak to one's altruism. Choose the vegetable and save the animal suffering in death and in life. Choose the fruit and save the environment. Both of these exhortations are very much in line with Jewish values, and I support them. And here in Southern California, as we suffer through yet another drought, I'll share with you just one of thousands of worthy statistics. Water usage data suggests that if every American were to avoid meat just 1 day each week, we as a nation would save the same amount of water equivalent to the entire flow of the Colorado River every year. More than enough water to alleviate this region's shortages forever. Altruism and sparing animals and healing our warming and desiccated planet are worthy things. I support them. But so is taking care of self. And it's that appeal that I spotlight most loudly today. Today, Yom Kippur is a great day of vitality, believe it or not. We're claiming another year of life on this rotating orb. But it's also it's also a day of death in some ways, because it's avoiding it if we lean into the liturgy with our penitence and our devotions, and also evocatively and eerily a day of imitating our deaths. Many of us are robed in simple white, as we will be for all eternity. We don't eat or drink. We transcend our bodily needs as if we are released souls. We spend 25 hours in an elaborate, ritualized dress rehearsal for the very moment we hope that we've actually staved off for at least 1 more year as a result of what we've achieved throughout this ritual. Life is in our grasp today, and death is on our mind today. Can this be a moment that we make a commitment to inscribe ourselves in the book of life for this year and hopefully many more to come? Transformations, whether they're individual or societal, are rare and they take time. And as I mentioned, my own food evolution is decades in the making. And I'm no prophet. I don't know the future. And I can't say with certainty what I will or will not eat 3, 5, 25 years from now. Much as it would make me happy and proud, I expect no radical shifts in the food choices in all of your lives, or in the array of what we serve here at Beth Am and at Pressman Academy. But I will celebrate it, if you're still listening at the end of the sermon, and I'll celebrate some change among some of you some of the time. As you make your Jewish commitments to God and to others, but also to yourself today, and especially if you are struggling with what I'm sharing, I encourage you to digest these ideas less in the realm of what you will hold back from, because that's harder, and more towards what you will add to your consumption of food. To paraphrase the great Michael Pollan, eat real food, mostly plants. It may be kashrut at its loftiest. So read the book. Again, it's called How Not to Die, and its title seems even more poignant in this moment as we are about to commemorate our loved ones' lives. Talk to your physician. Give this idea a chance. And if you're not prepared to go whole hog on this, perhaps my words, shared with great love, can help you think through the fact that eating healthily is a Jewish value. It's a Jewish obligation. And doing that one thing better this year may be the most important Jewish decision you make today for God, for the planet, for the animals, for yourself, for life. Gemar Chatimat Tova. And we're now going to move into the Yizkor service. If you didn't get a Yizkor booklet, you can go. There were some in the entrance to the synagogue, to the sanctuary.
Just so you know, we are only now in Haftarah outside, so we don't have to rush.
What's that?
We are only in Haftarah outside, so we don't have to rush.
Okay. We're going to begin on page 4. Cantor Chorny is going to recite the top 2 lines in Hebrew, and then we're going to switch to the top of page 6. So the top 2 lines in Hebrew on page 4, and then to page 6, and I invite you to all rise.
Now?
Yeah. But I don't think we open the ark. You open the ark?
No.
The ark stays closed.
Ark stays
Just-
closed, but
just-
they get the Torah. Yeah.
Rebecca, just be careful because the tie is on there. Okay, again, the first 2 lines on page 4 and then to page 6.
Adonai, my dam v'tirehu, v'eni rosh v'tichashavehu, Adon dam lahevel damai amav, kitzel hover, mein rosh tizkereinu, v'en adam ki tivkedeinu, v'tichaserehu mi'at melohim, v'chavod v'adar,
Top of page 6.
בבוקר יציץ וחלב, לערב ימולל ויבש, תשב אנוש הדקה, ותאמר שוב בני האדם, שוב אדוני עד מתי, וינחם על עבדיך.
We'll read responsively. There's a time for everything. There's a time for all things under the sun.
A time to be born and a time to die.
A time to laugh and a time to cry.
A time to dance and a time to mourn.
A time to seek and a time to lose.
A time to forget and a time to remember.
This day in sacred convocation, we remember those who gave us life.
This day we remember those who enriched our life with love and with beauty, with kindness and compassion, with thoughtfulness and understanding.
This day we renew the bonds that bind us to those who have gone the way of all earth.
As we reflect upon those whose memory moves us this day, we seek consolation and the strength and the insight born of faith.
Tender as a parent with his children, God is merciful with his worshipers.
Adonai knows how we are fashioned. Adonai remembers that we are dust.
The days of humankind are as grass, they flourish as a flower in the field.
The wind passes over it, and it is gone, and no one can recognize where it grew.
But God's compassion for God's worshipers, God's righteousness to children's children remain age after age unchanging.
70 our years may number, 80 years have granted the vigor.
Laden with trouble and travail, life quickly passes, it flies away.
Teach us to use all of our days, O Lord, that we may attain a heart of wisdom.
Grant us of your love in the morning, that we may joyously sing all our days. Shiviti Adonai lenegdi tamid, ki mimini ba'alamot, lachein samach libi vayagel kvodi, af besari yishkol labeta. When I stray from you, God, my life is as death, but when I cleave to you, even in death I have life.
You embrace the souls of the living and the dead.
The earth inherits that which perishes.
But only the dust returns to dust. The soul, which is God's, is immortal.
Adonai has compassion for Adonai's creatures.
Adonai has planted eternity within our soul, granting us a share in Adonai's unending life.
Adonai redeems our life from the grave.
During our brief life on earth, God gives us choices.
We can cherish hope, we can embrace values and perform deeds which death cannot destroy.
May we all be charitable in deed and in thought, in memory of those we love who walk the earth no longer.
And may we live unselfishly in truth and love and peace, so that we will be remembered as a blessing, as we this day lovingly remember those whose lives endure as a blessing. We're going to have you turn, starting on page 9, to any or all paragraphs that are relevant for you as you're remembering a mother or a father, a brother, a sister, a spouse, a son or a daughter, a grandparent or a friend. And we'd like to give as much time as the room needs, because these quiet reflections are very, very special. As you conjure faces, I often encourage you and remind myself to hear your own internal voice speaking to your departed loved one rather than just thinking about them, and beckoning them back into your mind's eye and thinking about how your life is different and hopefully enriched as a result of what you shared with them. So we'll give you a few minutes to say those paragraphs. We'll pull you out with a song with a nigun, and then we'll recite the memorial prayers. Page 60. Shamayim va'aretz Ezri Me'im Adonai Oseh Shamayim va'aretz. Let's read responsibly on page 61. At the rising of the sun and its going down, we remember them.
At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them.
At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them.
At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them.
At the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them.
At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them.
As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them.
When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them.
When we have joy we crave to share, we remember them.
When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we remember them.
When we have achievements that are based on theirs, we remember them.
As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us. We remember them.
Rabbi Chorny will now recite the memorial prayers, the Almalei Rachamim, first for the victims of the Shoah, and then for everyone whom we're thinking of today. You can follow along on page 14 and 15.
Almalei Rachamim, Shochin B'merumim, Aretzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Ashchina, V'mahalot Kedoshim U'Tehorim, Kehisor Harakia Mazhirim Lenishmot Kol Hacheinu V'nei Yisroel Shenitbechu HaShoah Anashim Nashim V'Taf שנחנקו ושנשרפו ושנהרגו, שמסרו את נפשם על קידוש השם, וגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. ענה בעל הרחמים, הסירם בסתר כנפיו לעולמים, וצרור בצרור חיים את נשמותיהם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, ינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם, ונאמר אמן. אלמלא רחמים שוכן במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כזוהר הרקיע מסעירים, לנשמות כל אלה שהזכרנו היום לברכה, וגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. ענה בעל הרחמים, מסתירם בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם. אדוני הוא נחלתם, ינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם, ונאמר אמן.
Mourner's Kaddish, page 17 in the booklets. Yitgadal, v'yitgadash shemei Rabbi.
Amen.
V'yalmad yivrach yerutei, v'yamlich malchutei. V'chayechon, v'yomechon, uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael. V'agala, v'yizman kari, v'yimru, amen.
Amen.
Yehei shemei Rabbi mevorach, le'olam, le'omel maya. Yiparach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitshomam, v'yitnasei. Yitadar, Yitalev, Yitalal, Shemeda Kudasha, Brichu. Le'ela, Le'ela, Mikol Birchata, V'shirata, Tushbechata, V'nechamata, Damiran Be'alma, V'imru, Amen.
Amen.
Yehei Shlama Rabba, Min Shemaya, V'chayim Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen.
Amen.
Oseh Shalom Ramav, Uyaseh Shalom, Aleinu, V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen.
Amen.
Please remain standing through the Ashrei on back in the Machzors on page 295 because the Torahs are still being held, and then we'll return the Sefer toward the Ark. Ashrei, page 295.
אשרי יושבי ביתך, עוד יעללו חסדה, שם שכב על השם של אדוני אלוהיו, תהילה לדוד תהילת אדוני ידבר פיו, ויברך כל בשר שם קודשו לעולם ועד, ואנחנו נברך יה, ואת אבי עד עולם, הללויה.
Was the Phillips the Maftir or the Kriya? Wait, it says on here, Maftir. Let me see if this one, okay?
Hallelujah, et Shem Adonai, ki niskab shemo levado al eretz v'shamayim, v'yarem keren li'amo, tila lecho hasitav livnei Yisrael am gerovo. Hallelujah, hallelujah, little feed me is more ladonai haaretz u'meloha. Tevel le'yosheviva, ki hu al yamim yisada, v'yam neharot yichoneneha, mi ale v'har Adonai, mi yakum minkom kodsho, ki chavayim v'har levav, asher lo nasa lashav nafshi, v'lo nishba lemima, yisav racha v'yet Adonai, u'ntzakam Elohei sho, zedor Hashem v'vach shefanecha, Yaakov Sela, Zihu She'arim Rashechem, V'hinasu v'chei olam, V'yavo melech hakavod, Mize melech hakavod, Adonai Jesus v'gibor, Adonai gibor milchama, Zihu She'arim Rashechem, Zehu v'chei olam v'yavo melech hakavod, mihu ze melech hakavod, Adonai tzvaot u'melech hakavod, Selah. Uvnu chor yomar. tov v'natati lachem Torati al tazovu Hitzchayi lamachazikim ba v'tomcheha mihushar derachecha darchei noam v'chol netivotecha Shalom, Hashivenu Adonai, Elecha v'noshuva, Chadesh Yameinu, Kekedem.
In just a minute, we'll start Musaf. Cantor Chorny will sing the Hineni on page 312. You can remain seated through that. After that, we're going to go into the Musaf Amidah, kind of how we did it on Rosh Hashanah, where instead of a full quiet one and a full repetition, we're going to do what's called a Hecha Kedusha, which means that Rabbi Chorny will begin the blessings. I'll give you the page numbers in a little bit. We're going to sing with her until we then go back and say the Amidah to ourselves in a quiet whisper. If you like, and I promise you this will not distract me or Rabbi Chorny, on opposite sides of the bima, Rabbi Chorny will point, there are 4 piles of little laminated cards, little mini meditations that were prepared by Rabbi Noam Raucher, who used to be an intern here at Beth Am and now is a teacher at Pressman Academy, on different moments in the prayer service. There are 4 different ones. And just as a way of enhancing what it means to stand in prayer, if at any point in the service you want to come over and take one, bring it back to your seat, and then go get a different one a little bit later, please do so. There are about 4 or 5 of each of them. And we hope that adds a little bit of meaningfulness as you're going through these wall of words, which is what public prayer is. Hineni, page 312.
I'm just waiting until the view of me is the front side view. There we go. Yoshev Teilat Yisrael Bati Lamot Litchanei Lefanecha Lamecha Yisrael Asher Shlachuni Hafal Pi Sheini Chnait Ve'akno Lechoch Lachein Avakesh Mimecha Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel Adonai, Adonai, Erachum v'chanun, Elohei Yisrael. Shaddai hayom v'noro, Heinai matzliach darki, asher ani holechet, לעמוד ולבקש רחמים עליי, ויעל שולחי, ונעל תשיהם לחדותי, אל תחייבם ימנותי, כי חוטאתי ושחטני, וגם בשערי אל יבושו בי ואל יבושו בהם. וקבל תפילתי, כי תפילת רגילה, וקולה נעים, ופרקה נעים, ומעורבת בדעת, עם הבריות, ותיגר בשטן, לבוא יסתינני, והנה דגלנו עליך, ועל כל פשעים תכסה מאהבה, וכל צרות ורעות הפוך נא לנו, ולכל ישראל לששון ולשמחה, לחיים ושלום, המת והשלום אהבו, ולא יהי שום מכשול בתפילתי. ויהי רצון לפניך, אדוני אלוהי אברהם, יצחק ויעקב, שרה רבקה, רחל ולאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, היה שתבוא תפילתי לפני כיסא כבודך, בעבור כל הצדיקים והחסידים התמימים והישרים, ובעבור כבוד שמך הגדול והנורא. אתה שומע, תפילת עמך ישראל ברחמים, ברוך אתה שומע תפילה.
Amen. We turn to the Chasi Kaddish, which is back on 298. Please rise. Amen. Beit Yisrael Bagala Ubizman Kariv Veiviru Amin Yehesh Rabbi Levorach Leholam Ulam Yitbarach Yitbarach Yishamach Yitbar Yitramah Yitnaseh Yithadar Yithaleh Yithalah Shemech Dekudcha V'richu Leila Leila Minko Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata v'nechemata damiran
Be'ama ve'imeru amen. Now turn forward to 3:13. The ark is opened. Cantor Chorny will begin. We'll sing along with her throughout, all the way through the Untitled Chapter, which we'll speak about in a bit, and the Kedusha. And then after that, we'll have an opportunity to say our Amidah quietly to ourselves. 3:13.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el HaGadol HaGibor B'Hanorah El Elyon Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chasdei Avot U'Mevi Goel Lifnei V'neihem Liman Shemo V'Yahava Nisod HaChamim U'Nevonim U'Milemed Dat Midinim Hefter Chaviv Yitfilah U'Taganunim V'Chalot U'Chanei B'nei Melech Malei Rachamim Mochel V'Solech La'avonim Zochareinu L'chaim Melech Ha'etz B'chaim V'chot V'neinu B'sefer HaChaim L'mon Chayim Chayim Melech Ozer U'Foked U'Moshiach U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham U'Vokei Tzara Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai V'chayim itim atah Rav leHoshia Mechalkel l'chayim v'chesed Mechayim itim rachamim rabim Somech noflim v'rofei cholim U'matir asurim U'mekayim emunato L'shenei afar Michan mocham b'gevurot U'nidom melech meimitu mechayei U'matzmiach Yeshua Michan mocham bracham zocher Yisrael l'chaim barachamim Baruch atah Adonai Mechayei Hamitim Uvcheinu l'cha Talei Kedusha Ki atah Eloheinu Melech Mochel v'Soleach.
I love the story of an 87-year-old woman who's fully dressed every morning at 8 a.m. sharp, slow-moving a bit, but sharp-minded, on her move to a retirement home. Her husband had recently passed away, And as hard as it was for her to give up the home that they shared, it was time to make the move. So she comes to the home. She waits patiently in the lobby, waiting to be told that her room is ready. And finally, she's informed that she can go to it, and she smiles sweetly. She moves her walker to the elevator, and a staff member starts giving her a detailed description of her small room, including the pattern on the curtains that will be hanging from her window. And the woman interrupts the staff member and says, "I love it," with the enthusiasm of an 8-year-old girl just handed a new pet. The staff member says, "But wait, you haven't even seen the room yet. Just wait." The woman says, "It doesn't matter. Happiness is most often a decision that you make over and over again. Whether or not I like my room doesn't depend on how I arrange the furniture, but how I arrange my mind. So I've already decided that I like it. And when I wake up tomorrow morning in this new room, I will decide that I like it again. And when I confront all the parts of my body that don't work as well as they once did, I will choose to be thankful for the parts that still do." It's a bit of a hackneyed story, and yet as a measure of one's life, this approach to thinking cannot be overstated, and it's built into the Untitled Chapter that we're about to say. The Untitled Chapter is the liturgical response to the list of calamities, and it says that it remains in your control with your prayerfulness, with your relentless working on yourself, and your generous giving to others. It remains in your control how you hold yourself in the presence of those calamities, and it impacts the extent to which they can destroy you. Now, some challenges are worse than others. Some impediments to our happiness are bigger than the color of curtains in a new retirement home. If your home is destroyed by wildfire, how much will prayer help? If your child was one of the last soldiers killed in Afghanistan, what does the Untitled Chapter say to you? If your basement is flooded with water and sewage from East Coast hurricanes, will self-reflection be your salvation? Our tradition might say, perhaps not completely, but when faced with things beyond our control, the best we can do is control what will always be in our control: our response, our internal sense of groundedness, our commitment to help others, our reaching out to the Holy One on the sunny days and the rainy days and every day in between. We remain standing or rise. The ark is open for Untitled Chapter.
Untitled Chapter, Kiddushat Hayom, Hihu Nora V'Yayom, Uvoti Nasei Malchutecha, V'Kom V'Chesed Hisecha, V'Tishev Alav V'Met, Emet Ki Atom Dayanu Mochiach, V'Yodei Havayet, V'Chotei V'V'Kotem, V'Sofer Umone, V'Tizkor Kol HaNishkachot, V'Tiftach Et Sefer HaZichronot, U'Me'alav Yikarei, V'Chotam Yad Kol Adamo, U'V'Shofar Gadol, Itaka, V'Kol Demama, Daka, Ishama, Malachim, Yechafezun, V'Chilorido, Yochezun, V'Yomeru, Hine, Yom Hadin, Yom Hadin, Livkod Atzef Amaram Badin, Ki lo yizku beinecha badin, v'chol b'hei olam, yavrun lefanecha kivnei maron, ki v'karat ro'ei hedro, mavir tzonotach hatshito, Kein Davir v'tizpor v'timhei, v'tivkod nefesh, nefesh kol chai, v'tachtov kitzpad b'chol briha, v'tichtov et gezar dinav. V'rosh Hashana yikatevun, u'v'yom Tzom Kippur yechatemun. V'rosh Hashana yikatevun, u'v'yom Tzom Kippur yechatemun. Abba yavrun v'chamay yivareun, mi yichyeu mi yamut. Mi v'kitzo, mi lo v'kitzo, mi v'hishu, mi v'mayim, v'rosh Hashana yikatevun, u'v'yom Tzom Kippur yechatemun, v'rosh Hashana yikatevun, u'v'yom Tzom Kippur yechatemun. Mi v'chaya, mi v'rav, mi v'tzama, mi v'rash, mi v'magefa, mi v'chanika, mi v'sekila, v'rosh Hashana yikatevun, u'yom Tzom Kippur yechatemun, v'rosh Hashana yikatevun, u'yom Tzom Kippur yechatemun. Mi anuha, mi ashkit, mi torav, mi shalev, mi chaser, mi ani, mi ashir, mi ushpa, mi arum, u'teshuva, u'tefila, u'tzedaka, ma'virin et roha ha'gezira. Ki geshimcha k'tehilatecha, kashilichos v'noach lirtzot, ki lo tachbot v'motamet, ki b'shuvo midarko v'chaya, v'et yom ototecha kelo, im yashuv miyad tekabelo, emet ki et hu yotzeram, v'et hayodea yitzram, im basar v'adam. Adam yisodah be'afar v'sofa v'afar, v'nafsho yavi lachma, mashul kecheres, kacheres kanishbar, yichatzir yavesh, uchtzitz novel, ketzel over, uchenan kala, ucheruach noshavet, uchevach oreach, v'chachalom yauf. V'yatahu melech el chai v'kayam, ein kitzba lishnotecha, v'in kainz le'orech yamecha, v'in shiur le'markavot kavotecha, v'in perush le'elam shemecha, shimcha hanahed lecha, v'yatanahed lishmecha, u'shmeinu karata v'ishmecha.
Ark is closed. Please remain standing as we move into the Kedusha on 317.
עשי למען שמך וקדש את שמך מקדישי שמך ועבור כבוד שמך הנערץ והנקדש כי סוד ציח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש שרים עליים דרים מטה כתוב על יד נביאך וכרזל זה ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות ולא כל הארץ כבודו כבודו משורתיו, שואלים זה לזה, היה מקום כבודו, ואומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבודו ממקומו, לפי מרחמים, והחונם המייחדים שמו, ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד, פעמיים באהבה, שמע אומרים, שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד, לאלוהינו, הוא אבינו, ומלכנו, ומשיחנו, שמך בכל הארץ, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד, ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור, ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהי ציון, לדור ודור, הללויה, לדור ודור. נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד, כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה.
We continue middle of 318.
חמל מעשיך ותשמח במעשיך, ויאמרו לך חוסיך ושדך עמוסיך, תוקדש אדון על כל מעשיך. עוד יזכור לנו אהבת איתן אדוננו, ובן הנכר ישמיט מדנינו, ובזכותם יוציא היום לצדק דיננו, כי קדוש היום לאדוננו, ואין מליץ יושר מומגיד פשע, תגיד לי יעקב דבר חוק ומשפט, וצדקנו במשפט, המלך המשפט.
The ark is opened on 319. We're going to say a few of the paragraphs at the beginning, and then the end of the V'chol Ma'aminim acrostic.
חסד מיתת משפט בכל מאמינים של אל אמונה, אבותינו ודאי זה נסתרות בכל מאמינים שהוא בוחן כליות, הגואל ממוות ופודה משחת בכל מאמינים שהוא גואל חזק, אדון יחידי למעי עולם בכל מאמינים שהוא דיין אמת, הגוי ביה אשר היה
בכל מאמינים שהוא היה בו ויהיה,
ודאי שמו כן תהילתו
בכל מאמינים שהוא ואין בלתו. 321.
הקצר בזעם ומריחה
בכל מאמינים שהוא קשה לכעוס,
הרחום מקדים רחמים לרכז,
בכל מאמינים שהוא רך לרצות,
השווה ומשווה קטון לקטון,
בכל מאמינים שהוא שופט צדק,
הטעם ומתאמן עם תמימים,
בכל מאמינים שהוא תמים פועלו.
תשכב לבדך, תשכב לבדך, ותמלוך חלקו בייחוד, ככתוב ויד נביאך והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ וימלך אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ולכן תן פתח אדוני אלוהינו על כל מעשיך ויראתך כל מה שבראת ויראוך כל המעשים וישכבו לפניך כל הבראים ויסוכו לו על ידך לעשות רצונך בלבב שלם כמו שידענו אדוני אלוהינו שהשלטון לפניך עוז בידך גבורה בימינך ושמך נורא על כל מה שבראת וכן תן כבוד אדוני לימיך תהילה לרעך ותקווה לדורשך ופתחון פה למייחלים לך שמחה לארצך וששון ליראך וצמיחת קרן לדוד עבדך יריחת נר לבן ישי משיחך במהרה ימינו וכן צדיקים יראו וישמחו וישרים ועדו ובחסידים יגילו מעולת תקפוץ ביה וכל הרישה כולה כשם תכלה היא תעביר ממשלת זדון מן הארץ.
Page 322.
ויצאו כל לעובדיך ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה ויברכו שם כבודך
ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה
ויגידו עם צדקך
ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה
וידרשוך מן לא ידעוך
ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה
יהללוך כל אפסי הארץ
ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה
ויאמרו תמיד יגדל אדוני
ויתנו לך כתר מלוכה Bottom of 322.
ותמלוך אתה אדוני לבדך על כל מעשיך והרציון משכן כבודך ובירושלים עיר קודשך ככתוב בדברי קודשך ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון לדור ודור הללויה קדוש אתה ונורא שמך ויהי נלוח מבלעתך ככתוב וידבח אדוני צבאות במשפט ואל הקדוש נתשביץ רכה ברוך אתה אדוני המלך הקדוש.
Amen. And as Cantor Chorny continues her quiet Amidah, we go back to 300 to say the Amidah to ourselves in a quiet whisper. Please rise back to 300. you're still davening, please continue at your own pace. In just a minute, we're going to rise. The ark is open for the Aleinu on page 325. And if the technicians can change so that the camera's facing Rabbi Chorny, that would be great.
Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol l'teit gedula liotzer bereishit shelo asanu kigoyei haratzot velo samanu kimishpechot hadama shelo sam chilkeinu kohem v'gor aleinu ki chol hamonam v'anachnu korim u'mishachatim u'modim. Lifnei melech malchei hamelachim hakadosh baruch hu einod einod shehu notei shamayim
V'yoser haaretz
u'moshe v'yikaro b'shamayim mimal u'shchinatu zo v'kovim leruim hu Eloheinu einod 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 Hebet Malkeinu hefezulato kakatu v'torato v'yadata yom v'hashivota levavecha ki Adonai hu Elohim b'shamayim imah v'haaretz nitachat einod 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 einod
Ark remains open. We go to the bottom of 325.
Ochi lalei lachalei fanav eshalam imenu mani lashon asher v'chalam asher ozo avi harinanot b'yad mifalav v'yadam marechei lev u'mi Adonai mani lashon Adonai savatai shivtachu v'yagid tehilatecha Hili ratzoni mefi v'gyon libi lafanecha Adonai tzuri v'goali
may be seated. There are a lot of modern shul communities that kind of skip over the next section, the avoda service. But if you do a bris for your sons when they're born, I'm not sure why you would skip over this service. And what I mean by that is, what we're about to do is go back in time into a primal, early era of our religion's life. And it's foreign and it's different, and we've evolved from then. But some of the parts of our tradition that mean the most, or that can mean the most, are when we go back to those early embryonic stages of what Judaism was going to be, some of which we have discarded since then, and some of which we haven't, namely the bris. And the bris is a lot weirder than this. And we see devotion here, and we see a congregation believing in the power of ritual. We really believe that the high priest was accomplishing something in there that would not be accomplished without it. What we're going to do is interspersed between Cantor Chorny singing through the traditional sections through the traditional tune. We're going to have some readings. Some of them are modern poetry. Some of them are more reworking of the ancient liturgy. And go back in time. Imagine you're on, the Disney ride of the Holy of Holies, where you're on like in a little channel, and you're moving from room to room, and you're seeing what it was like back then, which is the kernel from which our modern Judaism emerged. So the first poem we're going to read is a poem by Rachel Kahn about the world of immanence, the deep and indwelling opposite of transcendence, right? The thing which is close in, the being wholly inside of the innermost place to prepare us for entry, for offering, for avodah. First reading. Who's our first reader? Do we have a first reader? Yeah? Come. No, you can come forward. Yeah, if you're doing any of these readings, maybe come to this front section of the sanctuary now so we can call you up quicker when it's your turn.
Of the four worlds about which we are now speaking, you and I both know which is the highest. Atzilut, the spirit realm, the place where one must earn the 1,000 keys for entry. O holy gatekeeper, recognize me by my manifold gladly sacrifices. If it brings pleasure, I deny it, carving away my toivot until it is only a bared, barren, naked, I flying solo over salty blue seas, gazing into my own reflection despite the abject discomfort. O holy gatekeeper, I beg you, take note of my dedication to restraint. I am thoroughly imperfect, yet I am practiced in my withholding of desire. Just me and the trees, just me and the humble, lofty apple blossoms in the orchard. Let not even a peach pass my lips. Let there be no lusciousness, for each hunger I leave unfulfilled creates a gape of want, a wanton and open-throated child cry, a wildness, a vacuum, a pocket of space made specifically for your indwelling immanence to reside. I crown you with rubies and sapphires. I crown you with golden light. I am knowing you intimately while refusing to allow myself even a whiff of pleasure. This is how I demonstrate my commitment. This is how I gain entry, how I earn my keep, how I reach toward you like a sunflower to the light, sturdy stalk to petal splayed and seed burst. This is how I prove. This is how I love. This is how I pray. This is my dveikut. This is my atzilut.
Oh, give me the full symphony. Percuss against my every limb. Let me be breathed in by the wind instruments. Let me bowed and caressed by the string section. Oh, give me the full symphony, or give me death. I will survive on air alone until my last breath. My only bliss, my only hydration, my only nutrition, my only prayer. My entire spiritual practice is loving you. Time does not even exist. Why wouldn't I wait an eternity? Where else do I have to be? What else do I have to do? This is how I prove. This is how I love. This is how I pray. This is my dveikut. This is my atzilut.
Who's the second reader?
O vigorously strong, mighty, abundantly potent one, who can duplicate your powerful deeds? To serve you, you chose the Kohen Gadol, the high priest, to bind the headplate of holiness and don the Urim V'Tumim to serve in glory within your temple. And the faithful would gather a week before the 10th of Tishrei and segregate the Kohen Gadol. For 1 week, they would sprinkle purifying waters upon him to cleanse him, and he would dash the blood, burn the incense, and prepare the menorah, all in preparation for the great day.
When the lookout announced, "The first gleam of dawn has risen," they would spread a linen sheet around the Kohen Gadol to screen him, and he would remove his vestments, immerse himself, and don vestments of gold. He would make the morning offering. Then he would go to immerse himself again, don white vestments, fine Pelusian vestments worth 18 manna, in which to serve the King of Glory. He approached the bowl and leaned his hands on its head. He confessed his sins and kept nothing in his heart.
And now we move to the liturgy. We start on page 330. Page 330.
Chatati aviti bashati lefanecha ani uveiti anafashim kaperna lechatayim v'lavonot v'lishayim shechatati v'shaviti v'shepashati lefanecha ani uveiti ככתוב בתורת משה עבדך, כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם לפני אדוני.
And we rise the second prayer of 330, and for each of the times that Cantor Chorny and I go down to the ground to imitate what the people would do as they were waiting for the message from the high priest, I encourage you to go there with us and to try to get into that less held back realm where we imagine ourselves fully humble before God.
את השם הנכבד והנורא, מפורש יוצא מפי, הוכין גדול בקדושיו תורה, היו קוראים V'homerim Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Evahed.
May be seated, reading number 4. Michael, grab the mic.
That's redundant. The high priest strode to the east of the courtyard, where there was a pair of he-goats identical in appearance and value. He pulled a lot from the golden lottery box, placing one lot for the one above and one for the cliff. He tied red-dyed wool to the one to be sent to the cliff, to Azazel, to the one to be sent to the cliff, to be sent over the cliff to Azazel, to atone for the sins of his tribe.
And now 331, again we rise.
Ana Hashem Chatati Aviti Pashati Lefanecha Ani Uveiti Uvnei Aharon Am Kidoshecha Ana Hashem Kaperna Lachatayim V'lavonot V'lishaim Shechatati V'shaviti V'shapashati Lefanecha Ani Uviti Uvnei Aharon Am Kidoshecha Kakatu B'torat Moshe Avdecha Kivium hazeh yichaper aleichem, letaherichem mikol chatoteichem, lifnei Adonai. V'hakohanim v'ham haomedim b'azaro yeshahayu שומעים את השם הנכבד והנורא, המפורש יוצא מפי כוחן גדול בקדושה תורה. היו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים. V'homerim Baruch Shem Kivod Malchuto Le'olam Evahed.
And the fifth reading.
Mixing together the sacred preparations, he purified the altar of gold, 7 times to purify it, then 4 on each corner. He hurried to the live goat, confessing before God the mistakes and transgressions of the people.
And page 332 in the middle for the final confession of the high priest.
Ashu lefanecha amcha beit Yisrael lanav Hashem kaperna lachatahim lavonot v'lishaim shechateu v'she'avu V'shepashahu lefanecha עמך, עמך בית ישראל, עמך בית ישראל, ככתוב בתורת משה עבדך, כי ביום הזה יכפר עליכם, לטהר אתכם מכל חטאותיכם לפני אדוני. בהכהנים והעם העומדים בעשרה כשהיו שומעים את השם הנכבד והנורא מפורש אצלם מפי כהן גדול בקדושה ותורה היו קוראים משחרים ומודים ואומרים ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם
If you go to the supplement that say a votive service on it, the front of that page has the poem Mar'ei Kohen, what the Kohen looked like, a reminder that even though we experience today as a day of solemnity and seriousness, it was also a day in the ancient world of great exaltation. The Kohen Gadol came out of the Holy of Holies. They saw he was alive. His face was shining. They believed he had accomplished what they were supposed to accomplish. And they had another year of life. So we'll sing a little bit from the beginning of this medieval piyut that praises the Kohen Gadol. You can be seated for this part. It's on the front sheet of the packet that says Seder Avodah service.
Keohel hanim tavitarei mala
Marei Kohen
Kivrakim hayotzi miziv hachayot
Marei Kohen
Kikodel gedilim barba ketzavot
Marei Kohen
Kidmu tageshet betoch einain
Marei Kohen
Hayem ben manedor Hayem Kohen gadol Hayem ben manedor Hayem Kohen gadol Vitzito Mibei kodshei hakodashim
Beshalom b'vli v'gad to the road Tohar.
Ki tohar anat bitzni tahor
Marei Kohen
Ki yoshev b'seitzer lehalabei melech
Marei Kohen
Ki chochav hanoga b'gvul Mizrach
Marei Kohen
Yilush miluch shiron tzedakah
Marei Kohen
Hayem et manedor Hayem Kohen gadol Hayem et manedor Hayem Kohen gadol B'tzeito Mibei kodshei hakodashim B'shalom b'li v'gad.
Now we transition to the last of the special sections of Yom Kippur Musaf. We went back in time to ancient Israel and temple worship, and now we travel across time through too many eras of Jewish life where we've seen and suffered through calamity. The author, the journalist Bryony Clark, had an article in The Guardian recently. And she wrote with great detail about an incredible thing that happened in the summer of 1944 in Theresienstadt, which was the concentration camp in Czechoslovakia called in Czech Terezin, which was set up by the Nazis as the model camp, right? So that when people would come and visit, they'd be able to show, look how well we're treating the people who live here. So a delegation of Nazi officials, including Eichmann, hosted the International Red Cross for a visit in the summer of 1944. And leading up to that visit, many transformations took place at the camp to make it look like a camp and not a concentration camp. Gardens were planted, barracks were renovated. The big lie was really done well. Some prisoners were deported to the east to reduce crowding, and the highlight of this visit was June 23rd. It was going to be a performance by the inmate choir at Theresienstadt. And though it was meticulously planned, the musical piece that was prepared by the conductor, Raphael Schachter, was going to be a surprise for everyone there. What piece did they choose to sing? They chose to sing Verdi's Requiem. When the music stopped after the performance, the Nazis sat there in silence. This is recalled by Zdenka Fantlova, who 96-year-old survivor of Terezin. Then Eichmann apparently murmured to the people next to him, "Interesting, very interesting." Why would they find it interesting? The Nazis basically said to themselves, why would Jews elect to perform a Christian prayer for the dead as they gather in their choir? So the conductor, Raphael Schachter, had his reasons. He was truly a heroic man. He was a Czech-born Jewish composer. He set up a smuggled piano in the basement of the men's barracks. He snuck into the women's barracks to recruit a women's choir, all under the eyes of the Nazis, where one wrong turn would have cost him his life. Eventually and tragically, he was transported to Auschwitz and 3 other camps where he eventually died. So what was his reason for choosing that piece of music? In Clark's words, Verdi's nearly 90-minute masterpiece features a fearsome evocation of fire and fury, promises of posthumous punishment, and dire warnings of God's wrath. Verdi accentuates the themes of judgment, justice, and vengeance. A quote from the piece, "Therefore, when the judge taketh his seat, whatever is hidden will be revealed. Nothing shall remain unavenged." Marianka May, who was a survivor and a member of that choir, reported, Raphael said we would sing to the Nazis what we couldn't say to them. The Latin words remind them, hopefully, that there is a judge, and one day they will answer to that judge. Musical experts know about these things. I'm not one of them. They say that this is an incredibly complicated musical piece to arrange even in the most ideal of circumstances. So why would he take this on? Mrs. May's answer, she's the survivor who was in the choir, being in the choir gave us the wonderful ability to think about the next rehearsal, the next performance. It reminded us we come from a normal world. It was soul-saving. I survived the war and I still have a soul. And now the author in The Guardian, Clark, for the choir of Terezin, singing the Requiem was an act of moral resistance. The condemned sang in defiance of their captors and the fate that awaited them. Quote, "We rehearsed without sufficient food or clothing or sleep, but those in the choir had a reason to stay alive." There was so much death during the Shoah, and there were pockets of physical and military resistance. And there are also thousands of stories, most of them untold, of spiritual resistance, like the upside-down B in the sign as you walk through Auschwitz that says, Arbeit macht frei, work makes you free, this terrible, ironic slogan that the Nazis put up in front of their camps. But when you go through the ones at Auschwitz, you'll see the B is upside down, which many people believe was an act of spiritual resistance by the Jewish metal workers who made the sign to let all who pass under it know that what that sign said was actually inverted. And even the poems about the Holocaust are part of this resistance, both then and now. And Ella Ezkara, which we're about to do in miniature, is part of that tradition. We say these words, we recall these awful eras, not merely to dwell on tragedy, but to remember and to feel strong for a moment, because after all this, we are still here. And so mentioning our vulnerability is evincing our strength. And it's another opportunity to resist wickedness, both being done to us and to anyone. So we're going to move into that part of the service right now. Excuse me one second. Yeah, if you've been asked to read, why don't you come forward, and you can read from the microphone that I was using, and we're going to do some but not all of the songs that are in the packet. But we'll start with the 2 lines at the top on the second page of the packet. Eile ezkera v'nafshi alai eshbecha ki v'launu zedim k'uga beli hafucha. These I recall and pour my heart out, how the arrogant have devoured us. First reader.
Can we do all of them?
What?
This is the other 5 readers. There are 2 sets of 5 readers.
Okay, so why don't you read?
What am I reading?
Reader
First thing
1.
again?
Mm-hmm.
Just read one. Arise and go now to the city of slaughter. Into its courtyard wind thy way. There with thine own hand touch, and with the eyes of thine head, behold on tree, on stone, on fence, on mural clay, the spattered blood and dried remains of the dead. Proceed thence to the ruins. The split walls reach, where wider grows the hollow and greater grows the breach. Pass over the shattered hearth, attain the broken wall, whose burnt and barren brick, whose charred stones reveal the open mouths of such wounds that no mending shall ever mend, nor healing ever heal. There will thy feet in feathers sink and stumble on wreckage, doubtedly wrecked scroll heaped on manuscript, fragments again, fragments. Pause not upon this havoc, go thy way. An ancient Roman court decreed that Jews could no longer teach the Torah. This court sentenced to death rabbis who chose to ignore the decree. The Torah was more precious than life itself for these rabbis, our teachers.
We'll go directly into the second reading where it says Rabbi Yishmael. Karen, you want to read that one?
Oh, vigorously strong?
Rabbi Yishmael.
Oh, this one. Hello. Rabbi Ishmael, Kohen Gadol, asked to be executed first so that he would not see the death of the other rabbis. Rabbi Shimon had the same request. Lots were cast. The lot fell to Rabbi Shimon, who was slaughtered on the spot. Rabbi Ishmael, raising his colleague's severed head, cried out, "How the tongue that taught the words of Torah now licks the dust." And his own turn came next. His face was flayed. Rabbi Akiva also chose to continue teaching Torah in spite of the decree. When they led him to the executioner, it was time for reciting the Shema. With iron combs, they scraped away his skin as he recited Shema Yisrael. Freely accepting the yoke of God's kinship, even now, his disciples asked, he replied, "All my life I have been troubled by a verse, love your God. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul," which means even if God takes your life. I've often wondered if I would be able to fulfill that obligation, and now I can. He left the world while uttering Adonai Echad. God is one.
Kol haolam kulo gesher tsar mehod, gesher tsar mehod, gesher tsar mehod. Kol haolam kulo gesher tsar mehod, gesher tsar mehod. V'ha'ikar lo lefached klal.
V'ha'ikar
We'll move to the fourth reading on the next page.
Danya Gold Schwartzstein, mother of our member Maya Schwartzstein, was orphaned while a teenager. She passed away this June just before approving the final version of a Yizkor book about the tragedy that befell her hometown of Rohayan on Yom Kippur, September 21st, 1942. Hundreds of Jews who were rounded up in Rohan and neighboring villages were killed and or sent to Belzec or in Auschwitz on that day and the next. Here is a story from Leon Schreier of Bokoshe. We are praying at the time, not in the synagogue, as the Germans had turned it into a granary. When we saw from afar the car full of Gestapo officers, we knew right away that a great catastrophe was about to occur. The young fled and sought cover in the bunkers that we had previously prepared in the fields of barns. The Gestapo shot at those who fled and killed scores of them. Others were caught and taken to one of the buildings next to the Juderat. My father, an elderly man of 84 years old, and my brother-in-law and his 3 little children were removed from the house of prayer and seized by the Germans. In all, 300 Jews were seized and taken in groups to the station in Rohayan. The Yom Kippur event was preceded by a massacre in Rohayan on March 20th, 1942. On that day, well over 3,000 Jews were murdered. Danya and her grandfather were in line to be killed. Her grandfather didn't make it, but Jewish townsfolk managed to save her. The publication of Remembering Rohayan is a repayment of a debt. Through it, she brought the entire town she knew back to life.
On the next page. Ani mahamin be'emuna shalema be'viat HaMashiach. Ani mahamin, ani mahamin be'emuna shalema be'viat HaMashiach. Ani mahamin ve'af al pi she'id mameya im kol ze achake lo b'chol yom she'yavo ve'af al pi she'id mameya im kol ze achake lo b'chol yom she'yavo. And turn to the last page of the supplement. We'll read together. All this has come upon us, yet we have not forgotten you, God, and we have not been false to your covenant. For your sake are we murdered constantly, treated as sheep for slaughter. Why do you hide your presence? Why do you forget our affliction, our oppression? Our spirit is down in the dust. Our body cleaves to the ground. Renew us, restore us, restore us, restore peace to us. We'll put the supplements aside. You can read the ones that we didn't read out loud. I would say at your own leisure, but leisure is the wrong word there. But it's important to be reminded of all these stories and more. We're going to go back to our Machzor, and we're going to go to the middle of page 348. Actually, the bottom of 347 as we get ready for the confessional.
Anu azifani ve'atarechu mechanu nanu kishayoref v'tayerecha pa'im anu li'avon v'yatam alei-rachamim anu yameinu kitzel over v'yatahu u'shnotecha lo yitamu. And Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Tavo lefanecha tefilatenu, V'atit olam mitchinatenu, Shein anachnu azei fanimu, K'shei haraf lamar lefanecha, Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu, Tzadikim anachnu, V'lo chatanu, Anachnu Babutenu Chatanu.
Please rise.
Ay,
ay, ay, ay, Ashanu Baganu Gazanu Dibarnu Dofia Hevinu Vehirshanu Zanu Chamasnu Tafalnu Shakir Yatsnu Kizavnu Latsnu Maradnu Niatsnu Sararnu Avinu Pashanu Tsararnu Kishinu Horef Rashanu Shichatnu Tiavnu Tainu Titanu
Sarnu mimitzvotecha mimishpatecha tovim v'lo shavalanu v'etat tzadik al kol ba'aleinu hi emet asin tavanachnu hirshanu.
And we turn towards the bottom of 350 as we get ready for the longer list of al-chaitz.
Hatayudir ezeolam v'talumot zitreu kol chai atachofesh kol chadrei vaten Uochin klayot valei vein davar nelami meka Vinis tarmi neged heinacha Ucheini here at some of Fenacha Adonai Eloheinu Elohei Avotenu Shetislach lanu al kol chatotenu V'timchal lanu al kol avonoteinu V'tchaper lanu al kol reshainu Al chin shechatanu levanecha b'nes v'ratzon V'al chin shechatanu levanecha b'imutz al hecha. Alchin shechatanu levanecha b'yitzar Rabbi Alchin shechatanu levanecha b'yodihim u'v'lo yodihim v'yali kulam Eloah selihot selach lanu michal lanu kaper lanu Alchin shechatanu levanecha b'yyitzar Hey, shakatan, fenagog. Achit shakatan fenagog b'inayim rama be'achit shakatan fenagog be'azut metzach v'hali kulam Eloah selichot selach lanu michal lanu Kaper lanu achei shakatanu v'nachnu. Achei shakatanu v'necha b'tzum et yad v'achei shakatanu v'necha v'timhom lefa ve'ah kulam Eloah selichot selach lanu michal lanu kaper lanu.
Turn to 357 towards the bottom in the bold.
Misefer chayim v'racha v'shalom
u'farnasa tova
nizacher v'mikatev lifanecha anachnu v'chol L'chaim tovim, l'chaim tovim, u'lishalom.
Please remain standing. The ark is open. 358 for Hayom.
Hayom, 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 hayom tiamitzeinu, amen. Hayom, 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 hayom tvarechenu, amen. Hayom, 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 hayom tegadeleinu, amen. Hayom, 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 tizreshenu letova, amen. Hayom, 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 tishtevenu lechaim tovim, amen. Hayom, 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 tikabel merachamim uvratzon et tefilateinu, amen. Hayom, 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 tishma shabbateinu, amen. Hayom, 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 tismechenu b'mintzitkecha,
Amen. The ark is closed. Kaddish Shalem to complete Musaf 359.
Yitzkata, Yitzkata, Shmi Rabbi, Vilma Divira, Kirute, Vimli, Machute, V'chayechon, Uv'yomeichon, Uv'chayin Techobeit Yisrael, Bagala, Uv'yisman Kariv, V'imeru, Amen, Yishmi Rabbi, Mefarach, Le'alam, U'lemei, Omaya, Yisparach, Vishabach, Vishbar, Vitraman, Vitrasek, Vithadar, Vitale, Vitala, Shemetiku, Shaberiku, Liela, Liela, Mikol, Birkata, Shirata, Chishrakata, Vinikamata, Zamira, Lihama, Vimeru, Amen, Zitkapad, the Lord of Horn, Uva, Israel, Kazam Abuhan, Divishmaya, 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 Bimeru, Bimeru, Amen, Yeshlama, Rava, Mijamaya, Mijamaya, Bechaim, Aleinu, Me'oko, Israel, Bimeru, Bimeru, Amen, Hosei Shalom, Bimroma, Yasei Shalom, Aleinu, Aleinu, V'hal Kol Yisrael, Nimeru, Amen.
Shakoach to Rabbi Chorny. This concludes Musaf. Rabbi Chorny and I are both going out to the field where we're going to be doing a bit of Q&A with anyone who's present or who is joining us on Zoom. So if you're on this Zoom and you want to be there for the Q&A, you have to switch to the outdoor Zoom. And then we'll gather again at 5 p.m. either in here for a traditional mincha or on the field for our hama'alot in the round, creative mincha, and then ne'ilah together. Everyone in the field, there'll be no ne'ilah inside the sanctuary. We wish everyone a sweet and meaningful fast and a good rest of the afternoon.